Okay, then just for the recording, I quickly say it again. Welcome, dear participants, to our webinar on age and disability, a blind spot in policy making. I hope you can all hear us. It's a little bit weird in this webinar form when you're just in the background, but I think it's okay. So age and disability, it's a really broad topic. In our webinar, in our little webinar, short webinar, we will focus on aspects on independent living, deinstitutionalization, and personal assistance. Before we go into the topic proper, I would like to quickly go over the agenda with you. Again, first of all, I will say a few words about age and disability in the current EU policy agenda. Then we start with our great speakers, really great speakers. We have Adolf Ratzke, founder of the Independent Living Institute in Sweden, and also one of the catalysts behind the introduction of personal assistance in Sweden in 1994. Then we will have a really short break. Minike Ball, member of the INEL Youth Board, will talk about intergenerational support between disabled people. And finally, we will have a perspective from the European Parliament by José Guzmão, member of the European Parliament and the Disability Intergroup. During all contributions of our speakers, our experts, fortunately, you will not be able to ask your questions right away. After our speakers have made their remarks, there will be time for questions, for Q&A. You can answer all your questions and discuss with and between the speakers, I hope. So first of all, how to introduce this topic. Article 19 of the UNCPD, General Comment number 5, and the guidelines on DI, the new ones, adopted at the beginning of September, highlight an aspect which is often overlooked in the policy debates. That independent living, the institutionalization, and disability support services extend to all persons with disabilities, including older people, and that excluding older people with disabilities from DI and support services such as personal assistance constitutes discrimination. And the new guidelines on DI are particularly clear that institutionalization of disabled people is discrimination, meaning that institutionalization of older people with disabilities is discrimination. So far, as far as I can gather, this perspective has been overlooked in the debates over DI. One of the foremost studies we have, which gives us some estimated figures on the amount of disabled people in institutions in Europe, notes that state parties to the UNCPD, that there are some attempts, often quite half-hearted from our perspective, but attempts to deinstitutionalize disabled people under 65. But particularly in the last decade, we have seen an expansion actually of nursing care homes for older people. And also when I look around in my neighborhood, I'm aware of institutions, nursing homes for older people, and there is no sign of deinstitutionalization or even establishing smaller homes like it is done for disabled people. The European Strategy on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities tells us that there are 2 million adults with disabilities aged 65 or older or over in institutions in Europe. For disabled people under 65, it's only around 1 to 1.4 million. According to our information, at the moment, 11 out of 27 EU countries allow personal assistance for persons 65 or older, according to our independent living survey. In theory, but it is not always approved in practice. 3 EU countries don't have public personal assistance schemes at all. Greece is in italics because it is in the process of adopting one. But disabled people say that PA schemes are often inadequate or require improvement. So what we should take away is that the right to independent living extends to all disabled people. Deinstitutionalization extends to all disabled people. And also the rights to personal assistance extends to all disabled people, which has to include free choice of who provides the assistance, has to be paid through personal budgets, has to provide assistance in various areas of life and time packages depending on need, and also offer free choice at which times and which places PA is provided. This is, of course, not an exhaustive list. The list has to be far longer. What is good personal assistance? It's just a small selection. What has been done in the EU on the EU policy agenda? At the moment, currently, last week, the Council of the EU approved the European Care Strategy, a recommendation in long-term care, which unfortunately did not bring us closer to implementing these objectives that we need. The European Care Strategy failed to make a commitment to deinstitutionalization and personal assistance, and essentially allows member states to do whatever they prefer. The European Strategy on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities admits that persons with disabilities, young and old, have an equal right to live independently and be included in the community. But as we saw in the care strategy, it is in no way certain that we will have a strong commitment to DI and personal assistance. In the coming years, there will be two major opportunities to have EU policy documents in which to implement these objectives. In 2023, the European Commission will issue guidance for member states on independent living and inclusion in the community. By 2024, the European Commission will adopt a framework for social services of excellence for persons with disabilities. And there is still the Commission proposal from 2008 on a directive on equal treatment, which was supposed to become a horizontal anti-discrimination directive, among others, for against discrimination against disabled people. But the European Council, the Council of the EU, has not given much attention to this file, and it has been stuck in Council since 2008. So these three policy initiatives would be major opportunities to implement the objectives of independent living and DI for personal assistance for all disabled people. And yeah, we must see that these policy initiatives are shaped this way. So much for my introduction. I see Adolf Ratzka has joined us now. As soon as I'm sure, Adolf, can you speak already?
Can you hear me? Do you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Yeah, I cannot see my video.
That is correct.
I'm trying to amend this, but can't find the right button here.
Adolf, this is Ines. Do you see a message inviting you to become a panelist?
Yes, I have sent the message now.
Okay, then just a second, sorry. Yeah, I have, but I still can't open the camera here. Oh.
See the settings.
I'm sorry about that. Ah.
Don't worry.
Can we make sure, Ines, that
it says now Adolf will be rejoining as a panelist. So Adolf is now a panelist, so he should be able to switch on his camera.
okay.
Yeah, ask to start video. Let me try that. Yes. Yeah, it's
Yes,
working now.
now we can see you, Adolf.
Yeah, okay. Can see myself.
Yes. Thank you for joining us, Adolf. And I think we are curious about what you have to say.
Well, sorry about this delay here. And you just about summed it up anyway. Very well done. So I don't have to add so much more. I'll just make a pedagogical repetition. Okay. I'm talking about double discrimination of older and disabled persons. As we know, the world's population is getting older. And as we know, the older we get, the more likely we will acquire an impairment. By 2030, the number of older persons with impairments will have grown by over 50%, according to United Nations statistics. Some of them will require assistance with the activities of daily living. For example, bathing or getting dressed, or they will need someone to accompany them to prevent accidents. So how well are our societies prepared for the rapid increase in the number of persons with such extensive impairments? Most countries still expect the family, mainly the women, to be the first in line to care for old and disabled members. But the reliance on the family is a ticking time bomb. Parents, siblings, spouses also age, and sooner or later may need assistance themselves. Also, the role of families in the care of old and disabled members is declining as social and geographical mobility and women's labor force participation are rising. When there is no family to care for old and disabled persons, institutions are often the only alternative. Older persons are particularly exposed to institutionalization. Although research shows that they prefer staying at home, aging in place, as it is called, the institutionalization of older persons who cannot live alone has almost become the cultural norm. In Europe, 2.6% of the age group 65 and over live in institutions. 2.6. That's well over 3 million Europeans who are segregated in institutions, excluded from family, friends, and mainstream society. And their number is rising, as pointed out in a Council of Europe report. In 1961, I had polio, became paralyzed, and spent 5 years in institutions between the age of 17 and 22. These years left marks on me that took years to repair. I cannot understand how anybody will want to move from their familiar physical and social environment into a nursing home or similar facility, unless they are forced by the lack of alternatives in the community. Here I quote from the Common European Guidelines on the transition from institutional to community-based care. Quote, the institutional environment has in itself been shown to create additional disabilities that can stay with a person for the rest of their life. The lack of personal life, lack of autonomy, and the lack of respect for one's personal integrity can hamper an individual's emotional and social development. Language and intellectual development are affected, and institutionalization can lead to various mental health problems, including aggressiveness and depression. End of quote. And there's another quote, this time by Claudia Mahler, the United Nations independent expert on the enjoyment of all human rights by older persons. She writes, quote, "It appears that in most situations where older persons are deprived of liberty, ageism and age discrimination play underlying roles. Ageist attitudes remain persistent worldwide and lead to discriminatory laws, policies, and practices that hinder the right of older persons to personal liberty." End of quote. During the COVID pandemic, the group with the highest mortality were older persons in nursing homes. They lacked proper protection, they lacked access to medical staff, to oxygen, to ventilators. Was that just a coincidence? Or does it reflect how our societies value the lives of older and disabled persons? The CRPD prescribes community-based support services to enable persons with disabilities to live independently and be included in the community. Such services exist in many countries. Some of them are very traditional and are limited, and therefore more suitable for persons with minor impairments. According to my own experience of using such services in Sweden, they offer only a limited number of assistance hours to the client, and they are commonly known as in-home support services or home help, or the equivalent in other languages. And these terms indicate that support is not intended outside the home, not for study, not for work, not for social activities, not for travel. In short, not for life on terms equal to others, as the COPD states. Most commonly, assistance is limited to the basics: help with hygiene, dressing, warming frozen meals, and a shower twice a month. The CRPD in Article 19 also prescribes personal assistance services. There, eligible persons get an individualized needs assessment and receive periodical cash payments from the government, which we call direct payments. With that money, you can employ your assistance yourself or hire the services of a service provider. You are the boss. You decide who is to work for you, when, where, with what tasks, and how the work is to be done. You recruit, train, and supervise your assistants. Personal assistance got me out of institutions in 1966. Since then, I've lived in a community. My assistance enabled me to get an education, work, get involved in disability politics, and travel for lectures, work, and pleasure. My assistants were important when I got married. My wife and I wanted to have a relationship where we could grow as persons independent of each other, or with the same interdependence as is customary in our culture. And with the help of my assistants, I would continue to care for myself and do my part of the household chores. My wife would not be my assistant. When we travel together, we do so by choice and not because I need her on the trip. Our decision to have a child was also based on personal assistance. For example, I did my share of the physical work in child raising through my assistants. I took our daughter to the kindergarten in the morning, and my wife picked her up after work. I've been able to live in the community, to study or work throughout my adult life, and raise a family. I'm very satisfied with my life. It has been and still is a full, rich life, thanks to personal assistance. Many persons with similar disabilities could live equally full and rich lives with personal assistance services. Yet in most countries, these services don't exist. Where they do exist, the law limits them to younger persons. In Sweden, for example, the law restricts eligibility to persons under 65. If you are fortunate and get disabled before that age, you might be entitled to the payments and receive them after you turn 65. I'm one of these lucky people. So why is personal assistance in most countries non-existent or limited to younger persons? In some countries, for example, Sweden, personal assistance is a social security benefit and as such aimed at the working age population, which automatically limits its eligibility to persons under 65. Also, social policy distinguishes between persons with disabilities under 65 and senior citizens 65 and over. When I turned 65, I realized that I was no longer a client of the local government's social services department for disabled persons, but of the Department of Older Persons. Staff offices, telephone hours, and legislations had changed. The most important reason why older people are not eligible for personal assistance is probably the economic one. If older persons also were eligible for direct payments for personal assistance, the number of applicants would multiply. Taxes would need to be raised. Traditionally, the family has cared for old and disabled relatives without charging. They've done that for free. So any costs in the form of severely restricted quality of life, limited personal growth, and missed life opportunities were borne by the individuals involved and the families, mainly the women. This is how conservative taxpayers and conservative voters prefer things. Other conservative arguments claim that older persons are not able to administer, train, and supervise personal assistance. Such claims are based on old stereotypes. Research shows that today's 70-year-olds, on average, have the physical and cognitive capacities of 50-year-olds of a couple of decades ago. Thus, many persons older than 65 with physical impairments can direct their assistants, recruit, train, and supervise them, and benefit from living in the community among family and friends. Persons unable to do so due to cognitive, socio-psychological impairments or dementia can also benefit from personal assistance. About half of the roughly 14,000 Swedish personal assistance users belong to one of the above groups or are under 19 years old. Their direct payments contain funds for hiring a person who complements, not substitutes, their ability to make the relevant decisions. That is, we call supported decision making. This person can be a relative, a friend, or a trusted assistant who understands the disabled person's situations, needs, and capacities. All European Union member states have ratified the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Article 19 of the Convention obliges states to provide community-based support services, such as personal assistance, to enable persons with disabilities to live independently, be included in the community, at conditions equal to others. So, why do we still incarcerate people, primarily older persons? Aren't human rights for all humans and not limited to certain age groups? How many more years will we tolerate this blatant double discrimination of older and disabled persons? Let us work for transforming the articles of the CRPD into European Union directives. Most European Union member states have chosen to ratify the CRPD in a way that has not made the convention an integral part of national law. That would have made the convention legally binding. One way to correct this is to take individual articles of the CRPD and to transform them to European Union directives, which automatically become national law and will be legally binding. Thank you.
Thank you, Adolf, for your contribution. I see there's already one question in the chat, but we will save this for later. I think we will just we'll go ahead to our next speaker on the agenda, to Milike Ball, member of the ENIL Youth Board. Yes, hi Milike, there you are.
Hello, can you see me?
We can see you, we can hear you. Thank you for joining us. We are curious about your presentation.
Thank you. First of all, I thank all of ENIL workers and members who made this event possible and considered inviting me. I'm really honored to speak here today alongside really important speakers and a person I admire like Adolf. Before I begin with my topic, I would like to shortly introduce myself. My name is Melike Bal. I am from Turkey, and I am a law student at Social Sciences University of Ankara. I am hoping to be a lawyer when I graduate from the law school. And my introduction to independent living movement was through one of our national organizations called Association of Women with Disabilities. Their amazing work reasoned for me to meet with the NL, and I'm really happy to be here. And today I will discuss intergenerational support between disabled people, how old and young disabled people can interchangeably support each other. I think one of the most important examples of intergenerational support is that all disabled people, the first founders of the global disability movement, are now indeed old people, and their guidance and their leadership and their vision today, I believe, guides us. But on the other hand, I know, and I also have personally experienced that young people also can be tremendous supporters to all disabled people. And today I'm going to talk about how I became from one of my elder relatives, how I became their supporter, how I attempted to advocate for them, and maybe what we could do better in the future to change what went wrong with that instance. My uncle was a construction worker. He became physically disabled after working in a construction site, and he is automatically made retired by the government. He was not allowed to work inside the country for the physical safety reasons, and he worked in another countries throughout his old ages, until his old ages, and then there was a point that he couldn't work anymore because he had diabetes and his condition with his leg got worsened. And at some points, we have later discovered that he was taken under conservatorship and guardianship, I mean, and his wife was appointed as the legal representative, and all decisions for him made by his wife. But we, as the other family members, believe that he didn't receive enough care from his wife or children. So some series of events led him to live with us in our house for approximately 4 months. During this period of time, as a really young middle schooler, maybe 12, 13 years of old age, I provided my uncle with the medicine. I provided him his insulin shots, and also I have, in my best capacity, attempted to provide him some relief, some emotional support, and I tried to always give the message that I loved him, I cared him, no matter who he is, no matter how other people see him as incompleted and missing something. And I wish that personal assistance was available in our country, in Turkey, in his time, so he could maybe still be with us today, still be a part of community. And I really think that taking a a person's legal autonomy is as dangerous as taking someone's bodily autonomy away. And I believe in joint decision-making process, and I wish that he had the opportunity for other people in the other parts of the world had. And my work and this unfortunate event has led me to decide to become a lawyer and to work on the legal capacity of young and old disabled people. I can say from my experience that young disabled people is not evaluated in their perspective is not evaluated in in the situations of the care of for the all disabled people. I was always giving my other uncles and my mom recommendations about what could be better for my disabled uncle, and that we should ask him and we should include him in the process. But we failed to unfortunately do that, and he's not living in the community anymore. We have lost him. I'm really sad about that, but also I know this very bitter experience taught me a lot, helped me grow a lot, and I really want to thank Adolf and all other independent living activists one by one for making it happen at least some parts of the world, so we don't have to lose another member of the community violence and abuse. It is really important for a disabled person to make their own decisions about their life, because it was really difficult also for my mother to, while she was taking care of me, a disabled child, now also she had to take care of my uncle, and this made a lot of things really hard for her. She also neglected her health and her body, and we were in the eve of making tough decisions. We had no support, and I really acknowledge my mother's all attempts and all the hard work in this process. This is also maybe why the help and assistance that disabled people need, and when they don't get it often, because maybe gender inequality, women of the family has to do the care work, has to take care of the disabled members of the family, and it is really important to value one person's perspective. And I sincerely believe if they had listened my uncle's perspective about what happened to him, why his family didn't accept him to the home, why he had to live with us, and what he would want us to do, which actions that he would want us to take in order to maybe legally reverse that guardianship decision so he could stay with us legally. But this didn't happen. When I brought this app up, I always heard that he is someone of unstable, he is not trustworthy, and of course this is only about seeing a disabled person physically and both psychosocially disabled person as not equal, not peer, and unable to make their own decisions. But I sincerely do not believe that. He was aware of what's happening to him. He was able to observe what's happening around him, and he had a word, but he couldn't speak that up. So I hope in the future we have better personal assistance policies around the world, and we help disabled people more. But my personal experience with why independent living is not in Turkey right now, and Turkey is not a European Union member, but Turkey is also ratified CRPD in 2006, if I'm not wrong about the year. But as Adolf pointed out, Turkey has not linked CRPD to its national law. Interestingly made after CRPD, but it still does not in full compliance with the CRPD, especially on the independent living. In Turkey, if you are a young disabled people, your parents has to take care of you, and this is both a cultural assumption and cultural requirement. And if you need financial support, that government gives this to your family, and you have zero financial independence when it comes to receiving funds from the government. Still, to this day, even I am 18, government does not evaluate my personal financial situation, but evaluates our family as a whole, and thereby concluded that I do not need financial support because my father has a retirement salary. But this perspective lacks that I am a university student, and I am not right now, but if I want to, I should be able to live in a different home than my family. Maybe this way, if it was possible with personal assistance and independent financial funding, I wouldn't have to ask my parents to move into another city with me so I could go to law school. And for the old people, also maybe it's just a cultural and a religious understanding of the age that, again, families must care. It's also beyond a social, it's a religious duty people should follow. And even if at the instances family is not available or not willing to provide care, unfortunately, all disabled people end up in nursing homes or institutions. And I think that really should change, but also from the perspective of government, my personal belief to why they are not doing that is that with the financial payments they provide to families, they maybe see it as a way to please voters and get votes, rather than, I don't believe the voters in Turkey today would be pleased by personal assistance, rather than they would maybe, with the really right reasons, I can understand why people can struggle financially. They would prefer a payment rather than a dignified way of support. And I hope to change national policy in Turkey about independent living and personal assistance, and especially in the issues of legal capacity. This was my motivation to become a lawyer. I am really at the very beginning of the way to that, but I feel empowered and strengthened by advocates at ENIL. And before I conclude my part, I want to again specifically thank Mr. Adolf Ratska for inspiring me to work on the independent living. And I am really happy that he got the chance to access independent living and get out of the institution that he was in. And I'm glad that we have him here today. And I'm glad that we are lucky to have his experience and his experience to benefit us here. That's all from me. I thank all of you for listening, and that's all.
Thank you, Melike, for this this very personal statement. As you saw on the agenda, we had planned a 10-minute short break. We are going to do this now. It improves accessibility for people with ADHD and autism. So we do a short break. So it has not been this long. Yes, see you again at 3:01. Okay, dear participants, I would like to continue our webinar. Now it's time for our next speaker on the agenda, José Guzmão, member of the European Parliament and the Disability Intergroup.
Yes, hi Florian.
Yes, hi, José. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good.
I'm good, thanks. Great of you to join. Yes, I named you discussion participant. Can you enable your video?
Isn't it enabled?
No, we can't see your video yet.
Just a second. I have all the permissions on. Let me just,
Yes, now we can see you.
Okay,
José.
sorry, I
Great.
hadn't joined as a panelist, so that's why my video wasn't showing up.
No worries. All these settings can be confusing.
So should I start?
Yes, please.
Okay, so it was the request was that I could present a little bit of the status quo in European Parliament discussions on this issue. As you all know, we have approved in the beginning of this mandate a new disability strategy, which is a document which is based on the CRPD principles and has, I think, very interesting proposals on employment, education, and it's a good document. But as always, it's very far from the intentions that are put forward in that document are very distant from the reality in member states, which is also widely heterogeneous. I mean, we have countries that have implemented to a reasonable extent the independent life paradigm. We have countries that are currently doing the transition, such as my own. We have a very recent independent life law in Portugal, but we're very far away from implementing it fully as the right policy for people with disability. And there's also an issue when it comes to the funding of European funding for disability-related policies, and not just those. I mean, all kinds of European funding that is still going to institutions, to people and organizations that are working on a paradigm that the European Union recognizes is obsolete and takes no note of the right of people with disabilities to their autonomy, their decision making, and so on. And this is actually the topic of a study that we the left group has commissioned, and it was actually commissioned to Anil, and is I think a very significant tool to discuss these matters. Now, there is another report that was recently discussed in the European Parliament, which is the CARE report. And it's an initiative report on care policies in the European Union. And what I noticed in the negotiations for that report is that we actually have the paradigm for care policies is worse, even at the level of concepts, than the paradigm for disability policies. In independent living has become the standard for disability policies, that kind of formulation is still not used when it comes to discussing care policies, when it comes to discussing the support policies for aging people, and which is quite striking because it means that in European institutions and in several political groups, the idea that people with disabilities have the right to an independent life is becoming growingly consensual, but not the idea that aging people have the same kinds of rights. So we actually have wordings on the care report that are decades behind what the positions we have on the disability strategy. And there's also a second issue, which I think is very significant, which is a debate that is extremely divisive in the European Parliament, which is the issue of having a public policy for care based on independent life, or having a policy oriented for the growth of a care industry. And this, of course, I mean, this is a political debate, but one that has very important implications, especially in countries that have low income, low wages, and where a large majority of families simply don't have the capacity to pay for quality care, and especially for the kinds of solutions that we want to implement, both for aging and people with disability, and aging the people with disabilities, which is policies that value independent living. And one of my major concerns about public policy in the European Union is that the fact that we don't respond adequately to the growing needs of care for aging people that happen because people are living longer, then that's good. And also because we have specific demographics in the European Union that will lead to a very significant pressure on the existing public services where they exist, and also to, and that's my concern, to a gradual decline in the quality of services that are being put forward. And we had, I think, a wake-up call in the period of the pandemic, and I mean, certainly in Portugal, and I know that in other countries, people started discussing the model of institutionalization and its consequences that are, in some cases, were very extreme. And I think we should go forward from that, from those lessons, to discuss the issue of independent life for aging people, be they whether they're disabled or not. So that this is something that I think it's we have a window of opportunity to generate this debate. But this, of course, will require the resources, the financial resources, and that's something that I have. I mean, it's obviously a specific interest of mine because I'm also in the Econ committee. But one of the issues that I think is very important to raise is that we need to have economic governance rules that favor social investment and the investment in infrastructures that can shift the model of care and support for people with disabilities. And but we also need to have the same degree of clarity for care policies that we have, at least at the level of concepts, for people with disabilities. And right now, we don't have it. I mean, the idea that is very clear on on the disability strategy of the importance of deinstitutionalization is not clear when it comes to aging people, and we need to have that debate all over again when it regards aging people. That we have to also address the issues of mental health, and because that's one of the issues that keeps coming up when we debate deinstitutionalization when it comes to aging people. So I think that the intersection of these two debates is going to be a very important issue in European discussions on the pillar of social rights, and also the issue of resources. How much resources we have for these policies, and where are those resources going to? If they're going to perpetuate the kind of models that we have right now in many countries in the European Union, with this very paternalistic approach to aging people, or whether if we're going to use the resources to shift this paradigm into the concepts that are associated with independent living. And for starters, that would be my take.
Hey, Jose, thank you for your contribution. We are a little bit ahead of time, which means there is more time than planned for our participants to ask questions to our speakers. But of course, the speakers can also ask questions to each other. Yeah, I think the participants, you can raise your hand. There should be a little icon.
Florian, you have a couple of questions or comments in the Q&A box if you want to open and read out.
Yeah, there are comments indeed, but I didn't quite see the question, but I can read. Shall I read the comments anyway? Okay. Matteo Minosi says, "Hi guys, in Italy there is a big problem with institutions and elderly persons." Okay, I cannot quite read the next sentence. Many times in institutions, no, sorry, I cannot read it. It's not quite clear. Matteo, do you maybe want to ask your question or your comment? No? Then I would suggest we go ahead with other questions. Okay, Matteo has, okay. Okay, Matteo, you should be able to speak now.
He disappeared, Florian.
Yeah, I named him discussion participant.
Thank you, guys.
Yes.
To permit me to speak. In Italian, in Italy, from my experience, there are many problems with institutions of institutionalization of disabled people, both in younger than in older age, in older ages. When the disabled people get older, for example, in a city where I live, can where I live send a letter, the municipalization send letter to families to get people in recovered by other people after a 55th year. And recently I have signed a project for independent living, but in my opinion, there is not independent living because there has proposed me to live in institution. Abbiamo il mio video. Mi vedi? Do you see me?
Yes, we see you.
I restart my say to say me to live in institution with other disabled people without choose where I live because they send me where I live. And other things, the project of my independent living is written by another person without hearing my opinion when it is written. Only after it, there was a meeting to explain me and see it, and there is no possibility to have a personal assistant only to live in institution without no money to pay where it paid, and the money gives you to the contribution of our relative. In my opinion, there is no right to this project of independent living is made by European Resilience Fund in Italy called PNRR. And so I ask you if the PNRR and the European Resilience Fund are used to institutionalize and go against human rights to people with disability. It could be better not to use it. Are you, in my opinion, I hope that it understand what I said, because I never speak English. Sorry for my English.
No worries. My Italian is far worse than your English. Okay, shall we collect a couple of more questions or comments, perhaps? Yes, Lucas. I think I have to name you partition participant. You should see an invitation to become, yes. And now you can talk and enable your video.
Yes, hello.
I was very interested by this speech of Melike about this intergeneration context of the whole thing, but unfortunately, I have quite different experience because in Poland, in the reality, we only have still have only the pilot projects of personal assistance. There was a conflict. I can only say about my local scale, my local community, but there was a conflict about accessing to the PA service between people under 65 with quite good physical condition, and from the other side, the younger people who have more extensive needs, who were born disabled, and the reason of this conflict is of course money, because the community still have still don't have enough financial sources to support those two groups in proper way. I'm curious if our panelists have also experience of observing such a conflict, and in which way we can solve this one. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Lucas. I would say we take one more question, if this is okay for the speakers, and then we will have a round of answers. Yes, yours. The floor is yours.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you, we can see you.
Okay. Of course, we should do our best at the European Commission, etc. But I don't think the European Commission will be the drive after fundamental change. So I think in the first place, it's the older people with disabilities themselves in each European country that have to oppose their institutionalization. Independent living has been started up not by the governments, but by the disabled people themselves, who no longer accepted to be isolated from society. So the question is how to get minds changed within the older population that still don't see any alternative than either family help or institutionalization, and nothing in between. Okay.
Thank you, Jos. Okay. Who of the speakers would like to start to comment on some of the things we have heard?
I can weigh in on this last comment.
Sure.
I
Excellent.
mean, it's going to be quick. I couldn't agree more. I think there is One of the reasons why we worked with Enil is because, for instance, on the issue of European public funding for institutions, is precisely the fact that we feel that both at European and national level, there is a very significant bias towards supporting what is already supported. So there is a bias for basically not confronting the difficulties that we face whenever we have to change the way things have been done for quite some time. So, and that's, I think, the issue that we're facing when we discuss deinstitutionalization, because there is an enormous resistance by institutions. I mean, I'm not even discussing whether it's a mean-spirited resistance, but the fact is that to discuss the problem of institutionalization is to confront an entire culture on what has to do with dealing with people with disabilities, and it's not going to get any better, I would argue, because we're always going to have to fight against a number of conceptions on people with disabilities, and that's something that most decision makers simply don't want to do. These institutions mobilize a lot of people in our countries, people that have, unfortunately, a stronger public presence than the movement of people with disabilities, and they are quite often very influential in the political parties. For instance, ONGs in Portugal handle a significant part of public services from childhood to old age. So I think only with a very vocal movement of the people with disabilities will we be able to change the way things are thought and especially done in member states. I completely agree with that.
Yes, Adolf, you were waving your hand.
Yeah, I'd like to comment and continue on Jose's comments. I've noticed that in just about any country, the care industry has been much more influential than we. One of my best friends in the movement in Vlaanderen, the Belgian-born Jan Sabel, who unfortunately passed away, he once told me, he said, Adolf, what can you expect in a country where ever since the end of World War II, the Minister of Social Affairs has come straight from Caritas? I mean, that mindset, that tradition of thinking, I mean, they are in a railway track and cannot get out of it. We cannot expect them to get out of it. The only thing we can try to get them out is to disclose how much money they make. It's a lucrative business. I mean, these people are fighting with their teeth to keep on to the good money they're earning on us. So they, especially through their European Association of what's it called?
service providers for persons with disabilities,
That's ASSP or something like this, yeah.
EASPD.
They've been
Exactly.
very successful. And I followed them, especially the previous director, very suspicious to learn our language, use our language in order to defend their old business concept of making money on us. So they have much more credibility with governments as experts. Of course, if you look at Portugal, the recent so-called pilot project for personal assistance, the movement raised the issue, initiated the question, but when the government then chose to go to action, they awarded most of the center direction to the private sector, the existing charities, because they had the expertise. Because in the public mind, especially among politicians, knowing how to run an institution is a credential, a great credential, for running personal assistance. That this is a completely different mindset required, both the contents and the organizational structure has escaped those politicians. So the charities are ahead of us on this point. Another point I'd like to address is that come up several times, also raised by Lukasz from Poland. The distinction, the differentiation of the treatment in legislation and also in programs between younger persons with disabilities and older persons with disabilities is in part due to our own faults. I remember when I was younger, I would talk about how we have to get our brothers and sisters out of institutions. And I was talking about the younger people, because no young disabled person should have to live in an old age home together with older persons with disabilities. So we have to blame a little bit ourselves. I've never expected to become as old as I am now. So I didn't feel a need for fighting for liberation of all persons with disabilities, regardless of age. So why not adopt a new language here, and instead of differentiating by saying for disabled persons and for older people, we should talk about for all disabled persons, regardless of age, to make sure that we understand that we are talking about disability from childhood to until you die and get old. This is important to make people see that there's a continuum of needs. And my needs did not change when I got 65. I'm still the same person with the same interests, the same visions and aspirations. And that is true for just about everybody else. So let's not fool ourselves, and let's make sure that, especially you guys here, when you're still younger, fight for your own old age. It's in your own interest to fight for all persons with disabilities, regardless of age, and the right to live in the community according to Article 19. And that's about all for now.
I also would like to make a contribution from my perspective. In Turkey, our politicians, especially the conservative ones, see disability issue as a charity, and they only offer limited and really limited financial support to families, no talking of independent living, no talking of personal assistance. And my actual concern is with that people are voters are also happy to receive financial funds behalf of their child or behalf of their elderly and disabled parents, rather than have dignified personal assistance and care services. And I think the politicians know that and use that, and I think we should change that. I was taking notes about my country's national disability vision for 2030, and as much as it states that it takes independent living as one of the 8 focus areas, in the explanation to that chapter, it still goes on to discuss institutional care and how to improve institutional care rather than replacing it with personal assistance systems. Because I think this is due to some recent media reflections of the abuse that happened in the institutions, but the problem is that they don't see that the main problem is the institution's existence, and when you get it into a corporate shape, the abuse and the violence can be unavoidable, and rather than they're trying to shape the narrative to it was just a couple of bad persons and we are going to kick them off the force and we are going to bring good persons, and then institutions and segregating disabled people would be something nice to do again. And I actually here, after this comment, want to ask Mr. Guzmao, and I hope I pronounce your surname correctly, sir, and apologizing if I do wrong. What is your experience within your country? Is it only the conservative politicians and conservative voters that who does not support this kind of policies, or do you see in the more maybe libertarian, more left-leaning politicians also supporting that? So maybe that is the reason why politicians do not want to take action on this, because they not, even if they know it is for the better, the voters won't understand that, and it would cause a lose in the votes, and it would make their voters and constituents, I couldn't say that, more angry, and they would lose their seats. I don't know what's the situation in the European Parliament in your country in specific, but to my experience, even the oppositional parties who are a little bit libertarian and leftist in Turkey, even still suggesting starting autism villages, like they took it on a whole lot of different level. They're suggesting now to get a private island in the Aegean Sea, the one of the islands that Turkey owns, and make it an autism village for autistic children. And this is the in quotation marks most revolutionist and the hopeful party for the Turkey's future, rather than current conservative party. And I find this really ridiculous, and I was wondering your perspective. How do you change your voters' minds? What we can do, activists in our countries, to make people demand such change, such personal assistance, so then we can convince politicians that them working in such way won't cause them votes. Thank you.
Okay, political majorities, which camps support which disability policies? Yes, question was directed to Jose. Do you want to comment?
Yes, I also would like to get back at the issue of personal assistance. I mean, in Portugal, personal assistance is an issue of money and also of, let's call it, values. There is no availability from the government to create publicly funded personal assistance. And this means that people that have access to personal assistance can have them, In most cases, those personal assistants have very low qualifications and extremely low wages. I mean, it's almost exclusively composed of migrant workers. And there is a big emphasis on informal carers. And here we have a problem of values. It's just for a big part of Portuguese society, and I think this extends to other countries, it's almost unthinkable that, first of all, that it's not a family member supporting his own family members, that this is not taken care of within the family. And the issue is giving support to informal carers. And it's even more unthinkable that the person with disability would actually prefer to have a personal assistant who is not a family member, for several reasons, because he wants the family member to have its own professional career, because that's not the relationship he wants to have with the family member, because the family member available is someone with whom the person doesn't have a good personal relationship. And these are all big taboos in debate on caretaking in Portugal. Now, of course, when we talk with people with disabilities and their organization, they will tell us, yeah, but that's what we think. And there is, to first of all, a big to a big extent, an invisibility of the movement of people with disability. That has improved slightly in the past few years, but up to a very short while, it was almost impossible to have people with disabilities in the public arena. And finally, we even have people with disabilities integrating that kind of mindset into their own discourse and their own policies. I remember I give this example a lot. Right now, we have a Ministry for Equality who is herself a person with disability and speaks about the employment of people with disabilities as providing them a sense of usefulness and, if possible, a symbolic remuneration. And this is just, this is where we're at. I mean, it's really depressing, but that's our, and this is a minister for a socialist government, and the socialist government is the government with whom we negotiated the law on independent life in Portugal. So as you can see, we have our work cut out for us. When it comes to the political divide in Portugal, actually, the socialists are the biggest supporters and proponents of the ONG-based model. And that's a big problem when it comes to discussing deinstitutionalization, because people in the Socialist Party that are discussing these issues, they agree with the model of independent life. But when it comes to actually implementing those changes, they either don't want to confront the existing organizations or defund them, or they do, and their proposal is to change what is called change from within, to try and get those institutions to work in a different way. And this, of course, I mean, it gets us back to the whole credential thing. And of course, I'm not saying that this cannot be done in some cases, that you cannot pick well-intentioned people that are working in those institutions and try to basically provide new new qualification and tell, look, but that's a really tough job, because the first, you have to get those people to accept that they've been doing it wrong for their entire lives. But for the most part, most of those people are simply not available to accept the idea that, and when it comes to aging people, it's even worse, because it's completely endemic in Portuguese society. It's not just about old age institutions, it's the national health system. It was in all public services, the way in which old people are treated is preposterous, and this is a widespread. It's endemic in Portuguese society. And actually, there is also a discussion on proposals for qualification of public services people when dealing with these issues. This is very important for mental disability and psychosocial disabilities, because most people, for instance, in our national health system have no qualification on how to communicate, for instance, with people on the spectrum of autism. So we have on the issue on how to convince political parties that they won't lose votes. Well, on the one hand, I think political parties should be ready to stand up for policies that may cost them some votes, at least in the short run. And that's how I think we should advocate for policies in this area. But also, I think that there is a bit of a blind spot in this policy, is that many people are genuinely convinced that the institutionalization model is better. It works better, it's the best way to do it, and it's the model that people with disabilities and old people prefer. And that has that is still, I think, the mainstream perception. And one of the things that helps is that up to very recently, there was no alternative. There was only institutions. The alternative to institutions would be for people to have no support at all, to be abandoned at home or a context of domestic violence. So the alternatives were all horrific. But as soon as we started implementing the independent life model, even in a very extremely limited way, the demand was just through the roof. I mean, people just flocked to that kind of response, because it was something that it was desired for quite some time. And I think that's going to help, to implement alternative policies changes the way people think about this. And maybe we can even change some institutions. But for the most part, the argument for converting existing institution has basically led to not doing anything significant, not changing anything. So that's, but I think there's a big part of this, which is a cultural debate that we have to engage in our societies. And I imagine in many of our societies, cultural values, family values don't help.
Okay, this discussion is raising so many interesting topics. I don't even know where to follow up first. Melike and Adolf, did you raise your hands? Did you want to say something? Adolf, yes?
Florian, I'm sorry. I just looked at the time, and I have a plane to catch because I'm still in Strasbourg. I delayed my departure to be here, so I'm really sorry, but I'm going to have to leave you. It was a really interesting discussion, and I'll hope to meet you all again very soon.
Jose, thank you very much for participating.
Thank you. It was
Safe
great.
travels.
It was an honor to have you.
Bye.
Okay, we will continue our discussion for a couple of more minutes. Yes, I think you wanted to. Did you want to jump in, Adolf or Lilike?
Yeah,
Yes.
it's a shame that Jose already left, because I would have liked to ask him about the feasibility of the suggestion I raised earlier about transforming parts, articles of the CRPD into EU directives, so they would become automatically part of the national legislation, which the CRPD in most countries is not. But now he's left, so. But Melik, you are the lawyer, the aspiring lawyer. What do you think about that?
Thank you very much, Adolf. And really, a couple of months ago, I remember seeing you first at an Association of Women with Disabilities webinar, and I thought, wow, that's amazing, all the work you've done, and also in a sense that I've thought of my late uncle and what kind of opportunities he would have if he was alive, if he had better living conditions. In that sense, that reminded me of that. And I'm really now glad that I've chosen law school, but I also realize, unfortunately, our country's civil law is quite ableist when it comes to legal capacity and appointing guardians to someone. But I think we can make a change if we work together. And I'm really looking to life, what it brings, and I hope I'll make a good lawyer. Thank you.
Well, I think your proposal, Adolf, to have more binding legislation, I think it's really good. I think it's something we should strive for. It's probably not realistic immediately, but I think when you first started advocating for personal assistance in Sweden, it was also not realistic. And then it became very realistic. So in this sense, I think it's a good thing to strive for. Something I found interesting, what was brought up by the questions from the audience, the expectations among disabled people and older people. How do I want to be treated? What do I expect? Which kind of services also? Do you observe, maybe both our speakers in your experience, that there is a change also among older people? I've also say here and there that some older people start to expect more. Are you aware of, or what can we do to raise awareness about among disabled people and older disabled people that they deserve more? Difficult to say, probably. Yeah, sure, Adolf, just go ahead.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this for a long time, because I find myself pretty lonely here in Sweden, advocating for the right of personal assistance for people above the age of 65. And when I think about it more closely, if you get your stroke after the age of 65, when you're older, it takes you a long time to get back to life, to get your act together again, to accept the situation and try to make the best out of it. I remember when I got the polio at the age of 17, I don't know, it took me at least 5-10 years until I somehow got back on my feet, so to speak, on my wheels. But when you're 65, 70, and something like this happens to you, some life-changing event, you might not have the time. You may not have the strength anymore the vision or even the appetite for life to fight for these things. So we have to get people interested in some sort of like a life insurance to work on these issues already when they're much younger, so that by the time they reach 60, 70, 80 and something happens to them, they are prepared. They know that there'll be something in place that they can trust. And you talked about how people want to be treated. I don't want to be treated at all. I want to meet people who respect me, so I can respect them too. Mutual respect, not treatment. We have to watch out our language, so other people will hopefully catch on and use these terms too. There is something that I'd like to comment in this area that came out in the discussion earlier. I sensed a distinction between good quality services and just payments. I think Melike, you once made this point. Good quality service to me doesn't exist. I cannot really expect that a government or private agency, where people have had 3 or 4 years of university studies in social welfare, that these people know better than me what I need. I don't need that kind of help. I need the cash. If I think about it, it's really a class question. When I travel in other countries, especially those with low labor costs, like typical developing countries, Latin America, etc., I often see older women in wheelchairs being pushed by Filipino nurses in white uniforms, because they can't afford, the family can't afford to pay for these people. So they've had personal assistance for ages. It's probably one of the oldest professions in the world. They've had it for a long time. They didn't call it professional. They didn't call it personal assistance, but they've had it because they had the money. So what we want is to rechannel funds that now go to institutions or that kind of stuff, and instead have the funds go into our pockets so we can employ the people at our condition. So the people that we want, we can pick, whether it's a relative, whether it's a neighbor, whether it's a friend, whether it's anybody, whether it's, in my case, a Swede or somebody from Latin America who's recently immigrated. The choice is mine. I make the decision. If things go wrong, I can correct them. Because the alternative would be that I have to complain and complain to a person who is high up in the office, who takes the decisions, and I'm just the object of their decisions. So let's not talk about good quality services. Let's talk about how the individual can create their own good quality services.
I couldn't agree more that disability support services need to be person-centered. Perhaps the phrase don't give, I don't need treatment, I need self-determination. Maybe this is also a good good conclusion. Melike, you're waving your hand.
Then I can add a little bit final thoughts. I definitely agree with Adolf on the final points. We will, I hope, work together to make independent living reality for everyone, every disabled people, regardless of their race, religion, or where they live. And I thank all the staff at Enel putting this together again. Thank you very much, and I hope to meet all of you again in another event of Enel.
Yes, we should definitely consider having follow-up events about this topic, because there are many aspects which have been raised, like the role of service providers, for example, awareness among the various, among older people. I mean, Adolf, you had some really good points. One should think about this like a retirement plan. People are encouraged to start thinking early about retirement plans, but people don't really think about, that many people don't want to go in this institution, also older people. And also, now that I'm still young, I know that I don't want to live in a nursing home when I'm old. So I think it's right to already start, like you start early, think about a retirement plan. Think which support services you might need if you're older, acquire disability. We have, yeah, I think we have many aspects, and I was glad that an MEP could join us. So because we're gonna need political support to shape the some of the policy initiatives I mentioned earlier, but also to strive towards to have also binding legislation at some point. In what we heard from Italy, this patchwork on the provision of PA we have all over Europe. We see this everywhere, and I think having directives is something where we can, from the European level, yeah, the best way we can do something. Yes, I think some participants are already slowly starting to leave. We have reached the time limit. Yeah, I really thank you for the participation to the speakers. It was great having you, and I think we had good debate, which raised a lot of issues, a lot of interesting topics and aspects. Yeah, let's keep on working. I don't know, Ines, do you want to say a word?
No, thank you,
conclusion.
Florian, and everyone. It was really interesting to listen to you. Yeah, have a good evening.
Good evening to you all. Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Good evening. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.